The National Defense Industrial Association puts out a report every year called Vital Signs. It assesses the health of the defense industrial base. And this year, for the first time, they gave a failing grade. Wes Hallman is NDIA's Senior Vice President for Strategy and Policy. Wes, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what was the one most surprising thing that came out of this report for you?
I think the most surprising thing was we really expected that we would have more new entrants this year into the defense industrial base. One of the things that we've seen over the years is a steady decrease on the number of new companies garnering contracts. With this being the first year that we have COVID data, with the fact that the Defense Industrial Base was seen somewhat as a safe haven, and with the Defense Production Act contracts being let by the government to respond to the COVID crisis, we thought we'd see an increase, and actually we saw a continued decrease by nearly 300 more companies, less new entrants year over year.
You know, as you said, this is the first full year that you can see the COVID pandemic effect fully. Can we blame everything on COVID? Is that where all the problems come from?
No. So what I would point to, like you said, we do this report every year. If you look at previous reports, I mean, we were climbing or lowering down into the low 70s on some of these things. What the pandemic really did was highlight many of the challenges we were already facing, whether those supply chain challenges, whether it was the number of new entrants challenges. There's various challenges there, and what COVID really did was highlight those and drive them further into the red.
Well, supply chain is one of the signs that you looked at. It got a failing grade. Explain that.
So I think everybody's heard much about supply chains. These are, lead time on items, access to things. Also, workforce is a big piece of that. And we saw steady declines across the board on that. One of them is inventory management. So how long do you take you to turn inventory? What we saw is because supply chains were breaking down, those things that were in inventory stayed there longer while they were waiting for other parts to come in before they could produce things. So we saw across the board that supply chain issues were going down. One thing that was really interesting, we also have a survey section of this, and on the supply chain portion of the survey, when we said what are the biggest challenges, actually the workforce was performing the worst there. And very much the concerns that the skills gap is increasing in these companies as they are having turnover. They're not having the new people to come in on the backside.
So are policymakers prioritizing mitigating supply chain issues, and is that funded?
So that's a phenomenal question. I think all of us are focused on workforce. I think you hear about it a lot. The issue with the workforce piece is, generally speaking, people see it as a state and local issue. So from the federal level, while it gets a lot of attention, I don't think there's a lot of funding. I mean, there are sources of funding, but a lot of it is local. What we need to do as a country is look at the problem, find what is working, and then scale it nationally, and we're not doing that. When it comes to other things, you saw the America Competes Act and the USICA bill that had the CHIPS Act inside of it, funding that. I think we're getting after those things, but again, these things take time, and that time factor is going to play in.
So industrial security got a really low score, and this isn't just cybersecurity, which is a problem for everybody. It's also intellectual property theft. What's going on with that? So
I think it's no secret that some of our competitors internationally have been breaking into our systems, stealing our intellectual property, and then onshoring it and producing there and undercutting our industry. If you look at the organic industrial base, some people see upwards of over $600 billion a year in lost revenues and things. So it's really one of the great transfers of wealth in the history of the world. What we see in the data and why it remains our lowest scoring is just the sheer number of cyber vulnerabilities and the ability to go in there and either take your data, which is what we're talking on intellectual property, corrupt your data, which is important, or just erase your data. All of that means that we're getting a lower and lower score there. We did see a slight decrease in the level of vulnerability, so how bad it is, but that didn't make up for the fact that those vulnerabilities, the sheer number of them, increased.
Wes, I want to ask you about the state of innovation, because there's over 40 technology incubators and accelerators in the DoD. But there's been a decline in innovative startups coming into the department. Why is that?
So one is the department's a hard place to do business with, right? So that's one of the things that I think is the great takeaway, is that these companies are all in for the warfighter. But the fact is, it's really hard. There are so many different barriers to entry to come in, and the fact is, when you talk about speed and scale, the commercial sector can do speed and scale much better than the government at this time. In fact, that's one of the things that I think that PPBE Commission wants to look at, is how do we move faster? Because the faster you move, the more you're going to be able to bring those innovative companies that have these great ideas and want to get them into the warfighter's hands.
So how's the state of basic research and investment in basic research? Because that's what's going to eventually drive innovation.
I totally agree with you, and this is also something that we highlighted in last year's report and in this year's report. We still have the lowest level of federal investment in basic research since the mid-50s. And at the same time, our biggest competitor, China, has, as a percentage of GDP, is 3, 4, 5 times what we're spending on basic research. And remember, that's the innovation bank that we're going to withdraw on in the future. So we really do need to make those investments.
So finally, there was one sign that did improve, and that's demand. Why was that?
So remember that our scores are off a 3-year running average. And remember that, Congress will pass a budget, but it takes a long time to then disperse that through contracting. And so there's an 18 to 22 month delay on the disbursement of that. So what you're seeing is really the echo of the increased defense budgets in the previous administration. And so as disbursement has gone up, demand signals has gone up. Also, we continue to be the supplier of choice with our friends, allies, and partners overseas, and that remains strong as well.
All right, well, Wes, thank you so much for coming in. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.